It recorded all the great discussion before. Yeah. So they've done pros on the left and cons on the right.
All the way down the
Which-
tree.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're using, the arrow thing to focus that we can go up to the next one and the next one.
So yeah, my preference isn't to have the cons and the pros next to each other for a couple reasons, which we can go into unless no one likes that. And then
Well, you're going to have to solve that, but my guess is the way that it's going to work is something comes before and something comes after.
yeah.
So now you have
Yeah.
to choose what comes first, purple or orange.
Yeah.
Or
or yeah,
heaviest and lightest.
So I think, yeah, it's definitely a design decision. What the design decision right now is, I think, well, okay. Naively, it's the statements with the most impact. So it could be a pro or a con for whichever one ends up having the highest weighted impact against its parent. So the things that are kind of most important in that way. But there's another consideration to take into account that I don't know if we want to do now or later, is that if there's a very common myth, you might want that higher in the list. And that's the only kind of exception.
What is that? That's popularity ranking?
Yeah. So somehow gauging popularity and then using that as a sort. So I guess that is a design decision, sorting by popularity or frequency. Popularity works. Which you kind of have the same issue.
Popularity, score, pro con, top level, sorting order, I guess, and then another possible thing is like you have the weight or whatever you're terming it, relevance.
Yeah.
It sounded like you've done two different dimensions of that, but then there's also number of children arguments, like how big of a branch am I?
Yeah.
So all of those will probably need to be represented in some way, whether there's, sort order, weight will also be visualized. Some of these things might be duplicative, like if you weighted them, if you organize them, if you sort them by their weight, relevance or otherwise, and you do a bar across the top on a standard scale where all of these things are the same width, you can see a bar and this one's maxed out, and then as you go down they get smaller and smaller and smaller. How much of a branch am I that you might want to explore, or do I have children, is going to get represented in some fashion. Yeah. If I do or don't have children, like Kealo is probably doing it with the arrow, and I don't know what they do for the sub. For the sub arrow, like you can see what it's doing for the parent. It's got a circle with an arrow floating halfway.
I have too many. This is Kealo.
It's right there. We're seeing it now.
Yeah, let me get those two.
There, if you close the.
Yeah.
So it seems like every one of these can be clicked, but you don't know how many are under it, or. And then it's got
these are these
that little red bar. Okay, so they're doing that
comments.
too. That was that like thermometer bar.
Yeah.
Is that number of things under it, or impact?
No, that is people's voting on its impact. Like how impactful is this claim on the things above it? You rate the impact. It says the number of people that rated it. So yeah, there doesn't seem to be anything that says, now maybe those don't have children. Let me go up a level. So this one has 3, 4. So I guess to see the number of children, you have to look up here.
All humans should be vegan. We're at the top.
Yeah, so we're this blue
And
line
then
right here. So there's 5 children.
veganism reduces suffering, 99 comments, but
Oh, no,
comments is a
yeah.
different thing.
Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah.
What happens if you click a comment
As
thing?
the box. Yeah. it
Okay,
shows
so
the
yeah,
comment.
comments is like a whole other dimension.
Now it's interesting that they are using hover to give you different options,
Sure.
which isn't great. for
Doesn't
mobile.
really work in mobile. I mean, you can do long click.
That's
can do
interesting.
click
Yeah,
for
there is no way
focus or-
to. So they choose to give no indication on the number of children, and that's one of the decisions I think we need to make is that do we. And I don't know what this gray bar is because the gray bar could be, of course, if it's not obvious what it is it very helpful?
Right, it is changing size. Like, what's going on there? Is that number of comments or something? No.
Yeah, I don't know.
Impact. There was this other mention, like in the comments, like if when you clicked comments, there was like a bar chart icon. What's that? Oh, that's like breakdown of impact.
I think is it the number of. Okay, so I think these are people that are voting on the impact of that.
So it might be a number of people who have voted on it, almost like an R score.
Yeah.
Like not only almost like a confidence bar that like we've not only do we have an average that's been taken, but we have a large sample size. So that sub bar might be sample size.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
So like in this case, we only have like, or if you scroll up, do you get the sample bar on the top level? So this is how many people voting? 3, 6, 10. So 10 has brought us to 2/3 of the way. My guess is if you go to the stats on this one,
369 people.
and that bar is maxed out. Yeah. So I think it's probably sample size, and then it's like looking at an average of sample sizes across all the samplings.
Yeah.
So 369 is probably one of the biggest ones that's out there, and it's on the top level, which isn't surprising.
Yeah.
And interesting, cool. Yeah.
So yeah, trying to decide the default sort order is kind of one of the.
Right, and so now, so I go back to my question, like, is there a sort order that drives to the goals better than another one? Reducing the cognitive load, I guess, in finding evidence that you didn't prior know. So if you clicked above that you already have an opinion of one side of this, do you want the sort order that you see evidence against you first? See what I'm saying? That's why I wanted to like ask like a question like that, because now I can kind of reflect these UI decisions against
so
higher level goals.
Well, and that's assuming we do know the person's opinion, which is something I'd like to have, but there's going to be an option for them. There's going to have to be an option for them to skip that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean,
let's say you do know it. Do you want to do anything with it?
If we do know it, then I guess really the things I'd want to show to them are either claims that are opposing their opinion and are strong, or are claims that agree with their opinion but are weak claims or proven false.
Fucking rad. I love that. As a user experience different than Kiala, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, help me understand what I don't see in a certain sense, like feed to me the contrary. And you could use that to sharpen your own argumentation, right? Like you could be doing that but knowing what people are out there believing to argue against your position is really helpful, and probably, if anything, either tamps you down or makes you nuance your argument or like contribute
Yeah.
to a better, or surface better information, or like engage with the conversation at the
Yeah.
richer level. Because I think otherwise, like, right, if you don't do that, you get, you basically just go through and you spend your limited amount of energy reaffirming your stuff. Oh yeah, that's mine. Yeah, that's mine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it would be, one of the things I thought through is kind of a walkthrough. So yeah, first you kind of state what's your opinion, and then we surface the things where the assessments would probably disagree with your opinion. We'd show you only like 2 or 3, and say, say there's more, but on these 3, do you agree with this assessment or not? Because I guess the fact that something is pro but proven false doesn't really mean that that's something, like they may go, oh yeah, I know that that's a dumb argument. People make that all the time. So a bit of popularity is in that also. But yeah, just to show them 3 and ask them to rate each one, saying whether they agree. And here's the tricky part: do you agree with the analysis? So not do you agree with the statement, or do you agree with the, that's the kind of one of the UX things on how do you ask that question properly or clarify it, because the statement says one thing, but then the analysis says it's that there's no evidence to agree with it. So
and you're like,
when
of
they
course
say
there
they
is.
agree, are they agreeing with the analysis that there's no evidence, or agreeing that with the statement?
No, it's good. Oh no, it's a good distinction. I don't know how to answer it. I mean, depending on where you're at with the
Let me
development of the app, but I think
let me ask you a couple questions about where we were last time, because we were exploring kind of the design space here. And one thing that a design decision on using borders is that I think when it gets really kind of big, and I know that this is painful on the eyes. I was wondering if, so you have kind of borders, but then you have kind of just, rather than using white on black, it's more just faded stuff. This to me feels like it's going to get busy really fast when it has a lot of claims on there. And this to me feels a little less busy, but I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, or this one.
No, I think, well, if you're nesting, of course, these lines and stroke isn't going to work well like going off the page, where basically,
oh, and this is a bad example because this is nesting, direct nesting, as opposed, so there's actually 4 options here. I only did 3. where you're still using borders, but you do like this one to where the border closes and then you have the line indicator.
Yeah, and it's not clear why, like if you need the indent at all, because the indent is kind of implied in the encasement.
Really I like that better, because then that's kind of very similar to this as well, right? Towards fully encased, but this is, but then the white just becomes a single border rather than these double whites. I like that a lot better.
Yeah, and then it's unclear if this wouldn't just sit here inside the same padding.
Well, so the only reason I wouldn't want that is because as you go deeper and deeper, this becomes narrower and narrower. So I do want it. I think it has to go off the side, otherwise we limit the depth.
And it scrolls over. Well, then this one probably would too. This one would be as big as all of them.
Yes, that's kind of a.
You want it to look like that? I mean, if you're going to encompass, it has to, unless you're sort of talking about
So yeah,
it like card
encompassing or not
stacking where it's
is
like,
a decision I haven't made yet.
Is there any consideration to it expanding it to the or top level one as people scroll down, so that it's effectively moving over as people are scrolling, the top stuff is no longer visible off?
Yeah, so you can have it automatically scroll to the right as you scroll down. To some extent, it might be hard for the algorithm to determine, but just letting people kind of drag it, I think, is also sufficient. But we can give a little helper. It's hard to know which one. This can go down 3 levels, and this one would be at the top level. I don't know which one they're reading actually, because several of them are on the screen. But yeah, potentially in the future. I kind of like that is better than this or this, because it does kind of encompass. Now, whether this one continues the expansion all the way over, or if it just kind of lops off and makes a stair step, I don't know that if that's really that important of a decision. One of the other, okay, so that I was just curious, Max, on your opinion on whether this color choice, and we can also choose 2 different colors, or choose one could be dark with black with white text, and one could be white with black text, or one could be gray, one could be black. I don't, we don't have to do, I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not sold on the purple and orange. So it doesn't have to be.
I just kind of,
Yeah, playing around with
these 2 versions. The question is kind of like, are you going, on the bottom, are you doing, if you picture it, are you creating an encompassment where they're all the same width, and the like min width?
Well, the one thing to say though is if we did do this, we would still want the text to have the max width, right? So this would just be blank space, which might be helpful if you're scrolling over really far. You won't lose track of, it'd be like this one, right? So you won't lose track of how many layers up does it go, although you have it to the left as well. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that doesn't matter. I guess looking at this initially, I guess I really don't care whether this one expands over or not.
It's my main, one of the ways I'm approaching this is sort of like, what does it look like at the big level?
Yeah.
And so if you scroll down to that bottom one, it's like, okay, so that's min width is the smallest one.
Well,
And
are you saying what in this idea, what are you saying the screen width is? Is the screen width just a little bigger than the smallest one, or are you saying this is shrinking as? You're saying that this initially was shorter and then it's growing as you open up more children.
I guess I'm saying min width equals screen width.
Yeah.
Which implies like a scroll X.
Yeah.
Whatever. So you can scroll sideways, but do you force a sideways scroll at certain levels? That's a possibility, that as you scroll down and you get yourself underneath a div that is a child or whatever, that it like navigates you over. I don't know.
Yeah.
But is the picture that you want to create essentially one where these are all kind of encompassing? Because if you sort of do this thing on the bottom, you kind of have, you essentially have, if you were to play it out in a larger sort of sense, you'd have things like this. If you were to look at the whole map. And maybe you even are like this. No, let's say they all jam to the right, and then this could be also the orange color. And then you've got like this guy in here, like that guy. Anyway, like, is this really what people would have at a macro?
Mhm.
Like when they piece it together in their head by scrolling, like, is this sort of like what the map is doing for them? And I've obviously, I think you've said, let's,
Yeah, I like that.
This other one is like, there's basically gray space or something behind it all. If you kind of scroll off, this thing is, so there's this zone here where there's like,
Nothing.
it's kind of like cards stacking on cards as opposed to things nesting inside of things. Which would mean that the background, I mean, it's possible that you could use a highlighted color and a not highlighted color. So that when you're, you know, whatever's not in focus retains its color. This is starting to mix with the orange, but yeah, so the things that you're not, whatever you're currently not in,
Mhm.
would have a lighter
Yeah.
version of it.
And that's starting to get into the complex kind of state. So I think that
Mhm.
we're going to have this is the one, like we're going to have expanded and collapsed as an option for each one. And then there's I'm using the term selected, but that's probably wrong. It's like, I have this in this one showing additional information about it, because there's so much information that we want to hide. It's kind of like, show me its children and show me information about this and options of actions I can take on it. And so there's a big discussion on what options do you want visible at what time to keep because we're repeating so many things on this, to keep the interface not overwhelming. So it might be interesting to, do you, so I guess the challenge with using the kind of faded out ones for the ones that you're not focusing on is that, I thought initially, like, you didn't really like the idea of that white text on that bright orange. And maybe there's a
Yeah.
different orange where it works. But if we want to go with dark text, then that means we have a very narrow.
I think more like this.
Yeah. So then we really don't have the space to fade it out much more.
You know, I don't know what you gain from selecting it or having it in a selected state, except an expanded.
So
see it.
yeah,
Clicking
so
on it
right now
expands it, then something.
So right now I'm considering, so let me, you want to look back at this, at my screen. One of the things that I'm considering, and this is all open, is that there are some things that we want to be able to do. So we definitely want to be able to open and close it to show children. But also at some point we want to be able to share it, agree with it, disagree with it, and we may not even have all these options. I want to give feedback. I want to know how many descendants there are. I want to know if it has descendants. I want to know its score number or what is its graph. And I might even want an explanation of the score. Kind of like a written out explanation of how this thing is scored. So there's a way that I want to get more information on the specific claim. And then there's there's a thing that I want to show the children. Now we can couple those two to say, if you open it up to see the children, you also have the agree, disagree, share buttons. But I think that that'll be kind of busy. But then there is the additional complexity of saying, am I selecting this or do I want to see its children? And selection's not the right term because maybe I want to see the information on two of them. So I want to have this, I want to see the more info about this claim, or I want to expand it to see its children, maybe is the way to say it. But there's a lot of information there. So the question is when do we show what?
Yeah.
So I was thinking that,
I'm gonna throw another crazy idea into the mix. I know this is gonna be,
that's why you're here.
this might be a reversion. But so one of the things you can do with, so I was like, first of all, I was kind of looking at, color harmonies. The other thing was, so let's see, like, could we go, yeah, triad, split complementary. So one of the things that I've done in the past for things where it's like, it's kind of like two opposing things and what's in between them is like, and I'm seeing a lot of you working on like a spatial representation of weight, a spatial visualization of the algorithm.
Yep.
Well, there's a chromatic option, which maybe you've explored, which would be like, hang on a second. Let me take these two colors or something like this. But anyway, I'll just use like something that's sitting in front of us. Let's do, if we do blue and we do yellow, and then we do and you can have a spectrum in essence. I don't know that this is, we'll just go like this. Yeah. We'll go like this. And so it is totally for or totally against. So we say, 0. I'm just using it for like a game of math here. We do. And it would be continuous, a continuous blend chromatically between these. And This is really done with hue, saturation, and lightness. And if you were to sort of say that this is what we're working with. See, red and green doesn't really work well. You blend the two, the halfway point is brown. Purple
Right.
and orange, same thing. Yellow and blue work well in the sense of green.
Those green.
Blue and red work well in the sense of purple. Those are kind of the two that I've found, or red and yellow and orangeness.
Mhm.
But for getting over into the cooler side of the spectrum, like blue and yellow with like green being the blended, is a fairly decent option. But if you were to do this, hypothetically, the indicator for the children on, let's say here, I'm trying to think, like here, an option would become available where, for example, this outline would take on the weighted coloring of its children.
Yeah.
And so like what's weighing me is like an increasing weight of my children are telling me to tip more towards the blue, or I have an even tip. And so when you would look down each one of these, you could see it's the weighting of its downline in essence. And so you could play with that in a way of saying like where it's basically if you were to like if you were mixing paints and each one of these was like a tube mixing its way up to the top.
So the way the math ended up working out and the meaning of the positioning and everything, a pro claim to the main claim only ever contributes proness. It doesn't ever contribute conness. Is that right? It just has a different weight. Shoot, that may be wrong.
Well, you ultimately have a measure of like,
So there's,
I mean,
yeah,
if
there's-
you're depending on where you put your center point, like you can say it never subtracts, it only adds. And it's like, well, or whatever your numerical situation is, you have a zero to, you have a pro to a con weighting. And so maybe you're saying you don't know that at every branch.
Well, I
you know
think,
it at the top level only.
So there's several things the user kind of wants to know. And I think the amount, there's two ways to think about it. And one is it's just contributing less proness. And the other way to think about it is it's contributing some proness and some conness. But I think that it's simpler for people to grok if it's just like this one. Well, okay, we lose information though, because like you're saying, it'd be nice to know there are some cons beneath this pro. But the net result is that this pro just has less weight in the debate because it has some cons underneath it. So we could express that as, well, this has some cons, and if those two things are equal, then they can't, visually they cancel out. So it's the green, if it's blue, the yellow scale. Let me try.
That is interesting. Well, I mean, a con that gets completely argued against changes.
It just has no weight at all. Does that make sense?
Well, there's a weight on it.
It
never gets pulled down beyond its thing. Right. So it only contributes.
Well, it doesn't contribute to the argument at all at some point.
Right. So a con that gets outweighted by pros.
Well, if the
takes
con
on a
has
weight of
children,
0 or vice versa.
So if a con has more pro children than con children, then it will have a 0 weight and it will have no impact on the debate whatsoever. So let me kind of walk through how I think about it, and unfortunately it has a visual tied to it, but feel free to ignore this. But there's two things you want to know is like, how confident am I in this claim? And I'm using a bucket as an example. So this is like, this bucket is 3/4 full. So the truthiness of this pro claim is 3/4. There's some reason to doubt it. There's a little bit of reason to doubt it. There's a lot of reason to believe it's true. And then the next thing I want to know is, how does this claim impact the parent claim? And in this case, not all of that truthiness is fully being applied to the parent, because there are sibling cons that are canceling out some of it. So this amount of this truthiness is not adding weight. So even though this is 3/4 true, it's only 2/3 true or whatever. It's only 1/3 impactful because it's being canceled out by cons that are its sibling.
Yep.
Or I
Makes
guess it
sense.
could also be in its children, right? No, it's not. It's just its sibling. So this is the way I've kind of thought about. So then if you're just glancing at let's say you just had a tree of these boxes, you could look for the dark oranges and the dark purples, and you would get a feel for the argument, right? The more dark purple you see, the more the argument has facts that make it true, and the more orange you see, the more it has. And the amount of that on the screen should end up being the same as the number that you see at the end. So this is my most recent kind of brainstorming, which you also kind of see here, where we're saying, if you just have the leaves of the tree, then you can see, oh, this one, there's no purples that are true. So, or that have impact, right? I don't know whether this doesn't have impact because it's true or false, or if it doesn't have impact because it's outweighed. I don't know in this chart. But this one I can tell, oh, if this was all light purple, then I would know, oh, this thing's completely true, but it's just counteracted by other facts. If there was no at all, I would know it's false and doesn't need to be outweighed because it's false, right?
Mhm.
So I can look at this and kind of know those two spectrums. And it does also tell me another fact that people need to know, which is that, well, intuitively, hopefully explains that as this thing becomes less true, it also naturally has less impact. And if there's no truth, then it can't have any impact because the bucket's empty. But it could be true and have no impact because the children, there's other claims against it. I don't know. But that could also be too much information. And the current design just has a bucket and doesn't have this faded out in this real one, which just tells you the impact. It doesn't tell you truthfulness. But I think people want to know, does this have no impact because it's untrue, or have no impact because it's counteracted by other facts? Not counteracted, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're weighing two important things. Canceled out.
So it seems like your scale is from 0 to -1. That like true claims.
Well, yeah, I mean, I
True
say
claims.
it's 1 to 0 and no negatives, but yeah, things. Yeah, I think what you're intuitively pointing out is that everything's assumed to be true until you prove it false. So it is kind of like, but things.
No, I mean pro versus con. Like, or the statement is everyone, the top level statement is everyone should be a vegan, or concealed carry makes society safer. And then those things that are pro, all they do is negate negativity. The negative things add negativity. So they add some amount of weight times the negative number from 0 to 1, -1, and they drag that score down and down and down and down and down And if they
Yeah.
drag it down beyond negative 0.5,
Yeah, that's a
it's-
valid, yeah, because the system assumes that any claim made is 100% true, that is a valid way of looking at it, that only the negative things drag things down.
the other way of looking at it is negative. Cons are adding some amount.
Yeah, I don't-
And
If
the pros are negating them.
I mean, so I guess that doesn't quite work. So if I have two pros and one con, then this thing will be more pros. So the more pros I have, it does creep the score up if I already have a con in there. So it's not just the negatives, it's the average between the number of positives and the number of negatives.
Well, average equals the weight. You're giving the purples in there. One way of looking at it is you give the purples in there each a -1. And so you have two -1s, which is -2, plus an orange, which is a 0, divided by 3, which is -2 divided by 3, which is -0.66, which means that it's,
Yeah,
sorry,
I think it's
the purples are the
mathematically-
pros. The purples are the pros,
Yeah,
oranges are the cons.
yeah.
Okay, so
So then
doing
so
that in
it's-
reverse. There's
one,
3, and there's
one,
there's -1, so it's at -0.33 would be the score for that one you've just shown. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that makes sense. And what -0.33 is well,
Well, no,
sorry,
actually, this is 0.33 because it has more pro than con, but yeah.
So that's, oh, so yeah, okay, so you're doing
That-
it,
It's point something something.
yeah. -1 to
Math
1, I
isn't
think
quite a
is,
third,
I think
but-
-1 to 1 is like probably a more intuitive way to like conceptualize the,
Well, for people that are familiar with math and numbers, yeah.
yet in a lot of
average human
cases that's
don't
gonna,
think of
you're gonna
negative
struggle
one.
with that from a, I mean, you're gonna
Well,
have to
you just-
you're gonna have to normalize -1 to 1 onto a 0 to 1 if you want to do like a scalar.
Yeah, and I'm
depending.
expressing them in
How you wanna do it,
percentages just
but-
because people know what that is.
Sure. So there's lots of
Even
different
though-
kind of,
We can go both, yeah.
right, so in that case, 0 to 100 is what? -1 to 1, no, that's 1 to -1. 0 is, no, that's confidence, that's not, oh, how confident we're in the top level claim, which is stated in the pro. And if we're highly
Yeah.
confident of the pro, then we're pro. So pro is 100%, con is 0. But you're saying undetermined, not determined as con being true
Well,
in that score scale.
regardless of whether it's a pro or a con, we're using this scale. But then when you add them all together, the cons are made negative mathematically. So the confidence is still 100%, but yes, when you add them all up, those are mathematically, you make those negatives, you reverse this, and then it all adds up correctly.
Right, if their weights, if their initial weight that you're having to flip at the end was originally written as a positive as opposed to, it's written as a,
So you flip the signs.
well,
Yeah, like here's the math in action. This one's 100% true, but its impact on its parent is -33. And this one's 200% because it's more important than the other ones, and it's adding a 67. This one's 0 true, so it's adding no impact to the other one. So then you have 67 minus 33 equals 33. -0. The 200% there's confusing. Probably should.
We've got way too many terms. Do you have a glossary? We need a glossary for your algorithm.
I mean, I
We
do.
have weight. Do you have it?
Well,
we have
weight
weight.
is not an actual.
Okay.
Well, so we're using the term. Well, okay, yeah, I do have weight here. I don't have them written down. The problem is the terms have. It's really the proper term for weight is really kind of, I'm using impact because of a nuance in how the math works. But
Well, then you've got your scale over there. So you've got truth, true, believed true, trueness. Is trueness a measure, or is trueness
so
a measure of impact?
we're using confidence, not trueness, but as the
But
term,
then you're using the
but it's
word.
same thing.
Over in that scale, you've got the word.
Which scale?
Likely false, proven false.
Well, that's
On the
that's not
score, you have a thing called
terminology.
score.
That's the word false and true. That's in the definition of that. So we're using other words to explain it rather than reusing other defined words, which gets into.
That's fine, but what's your definition?
Of which
Because
thing?
literally, well, so the glossary
Confidence?
for your algorithm is going to, well, okay, so we've got the word confidence. We've got score, we've got believed false. Confidence and true versus false are not the same scale. One's whether or not it's claimed to be true, and then how confident are you in your designation of a claim being true or false is like, if you're trying to merge those two in an entirely evidence-based context, then sure, but they have different meanings.
Well, the word confidence has many meanings, and one
Yeah.
of the meanings is the same as truth.
No,
But it's slightly nuanced that
only when it's applied to
how
a statement.
confident I am that it's true.
Exactly. So you have to use the word true
Well,
or false.
I mean, when you say I'm confident in that, people know that you're saying you're confident it's true. The assumption is that you're confident that's true, not that you're confident that's false. When you
Right,
say,
but the
"I'm confident,"
definition is contextual to each claim. And each claim
Well,
each claim is making a claim, but each claim, like, it's colored by whether or not it's generally contributing to the top level claim, but it itself can be of low truth or not based on counterclaims beneath it. Is that right?
we will be less confident in it if it is true. If it is untrue, if it is proven true by, proven untrue by claims underneath it.
So the confidence is
Truthiness. It's the same as truthiness. In a way. I mean, the word truth and the word confidence have an overlap in meaning, and they also have other things that they aren't. So neither word actually works. So when we're defining it, we're just using the word confidence rather than truth, just because people get triggered by the word truth. But in general, it's the confidence of how accurate that statement is. And I've explained it in several different places, several different times, so the language is not consistent because it's happened at different times. But I don't see where you read where I put truth in there, because I thought I edited it all out.
no, I read the word false
Oh,
on your scale.
which one? Up here?
On your score. It's rarely used, likely false, proven false.
Well, wait, where? What? I don't know where you are. Where are you? Let me
You're
follow
pointed, you were pointed right at it. No, you were pointed right at it, up there on your score.
Okay, keep going. I have to drop off for an appointment now, but I'll be back on working
Okay.
later.
All right, cool.
Score scale. See,
Score
Matt,
scale.
rarely
way
used,
down
likely
here.
false, proven
Yeah,
false.
yeah. There's no way to say yeah, there's no word for confident. So we're using confidence rather than truth, but there's no way to say, yeah, that's just a limit of in the English language. There's no other, I couldn't find any other way to say it. I don't want to use true up here because because people misconstrue that, and I don't have another option other than false down there. So it's just a problem with how people perceive things. But also, this is like not part of it. I mean, that's not something that we need to focus on because it's not. It doesn't. It may or may not be used in the thing. The main thing is this: are we highly confident that it's true? Are we very confident? We're just leaving the word true out because it triggers people, but yeah.
Okay,
But mathematically,
I'm-
this is
I'm
between
grokking.
0 and 1, and then yeah, nothing goes negative unless it but when it's a con, we flip the sign on it before we put it in. So that's how the math works. Yeah. But we hard limit things to where they don't go past 0 right now. And that still has goalie all over it. And I think I'm gonna have to retire goalie bot, unfortunately.
I don't think it's doing you many favors.
Yeah, it was nice just because it people would understand that it's not my opinion. The score is not my opinion.
Yeah.
Because there are times the score will be wrong. And it was helpful that they understood that it was not someone's heuristics. It's like all the information you need to know how the score came about is available. It may be hard to read.
All right, so here's I'm working on a possible idea here, which is like, it's kind of a fast and dirty way to do this. Let's see here. This isn't going to quite make sense, I don't think. Kind of should invert them, eh? So this is one way of thinking. High confidence, low confidence. I think actually what's, oops. Do this over here. I think it's like what you're talking about is So impact. There's like, so is there a, it's strictly numerical claim, counterclaim, claim. I'm worth one if I'm a, if I'm full, if we have 3 sub claims just to a parent node,
Mhm.
2 for and 2 against, and they are all unrefuted and confidence is full on all of them. Each is scored as either a 1 or a -1, roughly speaking.
Yeah. Mhm.
There's
The two
not
pros and
like
two cons.
there's not a separate score that it's multiplied by, like, this
Oh,
is
well,
extra important.
I'm sorry, there is importance. Yeah. Which is also similar to relevancy. The reason we're using importance is because relevancy just is like, things can be less relevant, but also things can be more important than other claims. So we use importance for that rather than relevance, but in debate terminology, it's usually called relevance. So I actually do have the math. It's probably good for you to work through it and understand it. But also,
I mean, the impact of a claim. What I'm saying here is the sum of all its pro children minus all of its con children. Roughly speaking, I mean, depending on where you
right,
put
yeah, times
the
important,
signs.
yeah. Right.
But each of
Yeah.
its children stacking up
Yeah.
the confidence times the importance.
Yeah. Yep.
So so then confidence equals,
I don't know if in your understanding of the math, it's apparent that claims with less confidence automatically also have less impact. I guess I've said that a couple times, so maybe that's obvious. I just want to make sure.
well, I mean, you would see it here. I mean, impact is equal to the sum of those children that are all the children that are pro with their confidence multiplied by their importance score. And that confidence is
Yeah, I guess because
eventually this impact, the sum of my children, my impact, and this the impact.
I just realized I'm using the word impact for two different things.
Yeah, there's an impact of my node. The impact of one of my children, this equals node, child node confidence score. Times, well, confidence, not times importance, right? So the impact of one of my children on me is their confidence score times importance, which is basically down here. Confidence times importance times pro/con coefficient. If that's a -1 or whatever.
There's also, in the chart I was doing, there is a concept of the impact of this node on the main claim, like the whole thing we're talking about with confidence on the parent or the main one.
Impact of node on
The
super
main
parent.
claim. Yes.
Main claim. Right, there's like global impact. There's local impact, and you can see it from either side. But what I'm not sure of is where's the nested version of impact. So impact at impact of one of my children, my impact on my parent is my confidence score equals my confidence score. But what is my confidence score? But impact of a claim is not this. This is not the impact. This is one and the same as the confidence. That can't be right.
Well, if you're taking the confidence and multiplying it by its importance and dividing it by.
This is confidence. This is not impact. This is confidence. This is confidence of a node.
Yeah.
And then impact is confidence times importance times directional coefficient.
Yeah.
Okay, so confidence equals
it's children's confidence times the importance.
Children's confidence times importance summed up and aggregated. So the impact of my node on my parent equals my confidence score times, it actually means this, equals me, my node, confidence and importance times my pro/con. Impact of one of my children equals the child's node's confidence times their importance so confidence great. Okay, so that makes sense now. Confidence rolls all the way through. And at each node, it gets blended with its siblings and weighted by its moderator proclaimed importance. Impact of my node on my claim parent. Okay, so now confidence. So what I'm picturing is, what if this is not impact, but importance? And this is so for and against on the low, this is direction, but we're not actually showing impact. My impact is relative between child and parent. So you can look at what is the impact of something on me, what is my impact on something else. So that changes, and it's not a global characteristic. What if this was my impact, but you'd have to pick the direction. So if I'm in a node, my impact on my parent is my hue, my lightness, my darkness. My impact on my parent. And then the impact of my children on me. Because when I look at the interface here, it's like, oops, impact on me. Impact on my node is kind of there. Impact on my parent's node is where? Impact on my parent's node is somewhat impact. Hold on. impact of my node on my parent is my confidence times my importance times my direction. It's 3 dimensions, isn't it, of each impact?
Yeah, we are kind of at the 2 hours. I don't want to take too much of your time, and I'm getting pretty tired. But I know you've done a lot of mental modeling. So I'm probably breaking your flow. In short, I think the impact on the parent and the impact on the children, all that stuff, I think that that's stuff that we could safely ignore. I think they want to know what is the confidence of this claim and what's its impact, what's its global impact. I don't think it's that important. Like I think they can look at its context and kind of figure out its local impact. So I think in the priority of what to show, I think we can kind of leave that one dimension out. But this is the point where my head starts to spin. So.
Yeah. You are actually putting in an importance score. What's the default? The default's 1 or what?
Yeah, the default is 1. Everything, when you put in a new claim, it assumes it's 100% confident and 100% impactful, or 1, a point, 1 point. And then we go into fractions. And then you could add, when you add a child, you can either say, oh, this is affecting the confidence, the truthiness, or this is affecting the importance. And so if you have a pro that affects importance, it adds a 2 times multiplier to its weight. And if you have a con that affects its importance, it would cut it in half, its weight in half, which is kind of arbitrary.
So the metaphor that I'm getting in my mind is like, and where I was sort of going with where I was sort of going with trying to work the colors is like, this is not quite right. I wanted, here, this one might be a little better. Where what I was trying to work on was like, your argument for making this thing true is like live branches, like confident true statements all the way down are like living leaves and living nodes. Those things that have been disproven have been diminished at each.
Yeah.
And it's not because you have 2 countervailing forces. You have like something that's globally for this argument being true, which is kind of like life force and anti-life force. And when you get to the existence of when a branch like is dead, it does not or if you were thinking this is like a root system, like this root system is invalid because the things beneath it like have lost. The life force beneath it is lost. And there's gradations of like, well, that's a weak root. That's a weaker root in the
Mhm.
system because it's contributing less upward.
Yeah.
So I was kind of playing on that, and then I was sort of like, well, if you were to work almost like a spectrum, in essence, that's like green to brown or something. I'm just throwing it out in a sense that's kind of like,
Mhm.
you know, these things, because everywhere that you go, repeating this thing, everywhere that you go in this tree and you see orange, it's all part of an overall effort to make this tree either alive, well, based on the color, either alive or dead, proving this claim. And then to me, that does kind of feel like it either is given life or it's, you know, and it, so I'm thinking of actually like a root system, maybe more where like, sure, you have roots that may exist, but they can't contribute up. And you're sort of doing that in, you're working with that concept in this space to a degree. But in this case, you're actually like zooming out as opposed to like actually, you know, like if this were to sort of like find itself looking more like a tree where basically, you know, this is alive and, you know, this half of the tree is dead, but you make it proportional. I mean, I'm not solving the for exactly the first part of the or the iPhone version of this, but just as a conceptual model, like what I'm seeing is that whatever this percentage is, like 8% of this 8% of the root stock is connected to this one. You have kind of like double overlapping or something.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think in this one the problem is that bottom row and the other, well, the purples to the left are actually countered out up, so those should be kind of a light purples rather than dark purple. So then when you look at
these,
it, you know that branch is dead. Yeah, that should be dead. But it,
yeah. And so
so
I think you've just keyed
then
into
you would
something,
see,
which is
oh,
like the local versus the global representation. The global representation is that I'm actually I don't contribute enough to be a live, like a majority alive branch, or vice versa. I don't contribute enough to have killed this tree enough to have like ruined this root. Therefore, my what connects down to me ultimately ends up like shading me by my global impact is very different than shading me by my local impact.
Right.
So that could be, that might
Oh yeah, that's
provide
so
something.
yeah, if you see it as the kind of the roots as the pros, and maybe like even like a bug is the cons. And if the bugs have killed that root, if there's enough more bugs than there is root, they've killed that root, and that root's dead. And
yeah, it's a great argument. Way the fuck down there. Great argument. Great argument. It's
right.
It's 100% awesome.
Yeah. It's just
but it exists in a lineage that it's feudal. And like it's moot at that. It's moot at that point. And so
at
its
the top
color,
level.
It's like shading or something could be mooted by being muted, by being, because then, so maybe, what did we call that? Global impact. If we were sort of like low global impact. Now, and you could just not have this. I'm still sort of wondering if there's an option for, I'm still just wondering if there's an option for this center business of the
greens,
intermediary colors, that there's like, you know, blending in it. And
I
or,
think
you
when
know,
I-
if you were to sort of
yeah.
work live,
I
a
think when I
live
tried to
versus
work
dead.
that out mathematically, I didn't end up with anything that was half one, half the other. Well, there are two ways to look at it. One way of looking at it is half one, half the other one, and the other one is, on my dimension, I'm making them smaller boxes. Well,
Exactly.
so I'm just making the blue shorter and ignoring the yellow rather than doing it. So that's the difference.
Yeah,
in the
that's what you're doing
visualization.
is you're using space.
Yeah, right.
You're
right,
using
right. As
x-axis
opposed to using
on a
combination.
relative scale.
Yeah. And the assumption there was that was easier to think about. And I do, and you're probably aware of this concern about using kind of color gradients. I don't think that's very intuitive to the human mind, but I could be wrong.
Well, that's why I was like,
Space
well,
is a
that
strong
I agree. Yet, if this was,
It might be a better metaphor.
if this was not this, I'll show you one where if we do add one more on here. Oops. Come on now. If we went like, let's pick one. Oh, here. This works for tree or like tree leaves.
Oh, because people already have an association with brown being dead and green being alive.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
summer, fall.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's interesting because there is a almost genetic understanding. Like I wouldn't be surprised. Like the whole reason why we find blue skies beautiful and green trees beautiful, there's
there's an entire
something.
Science that studies this called biophilia, which I did my senior seminar on. It's like the biopsychological, evolutionary, biological reasons for aesthetic psychology. So they study why are people more productive in blue rooms, or patients heal 15% faster if they have access to a window, so productivity, healing, well-being. But if you look at biophilic design principles, you'll find a lot of inspiration for, and then architectures. Let's see if
I was
Terra movement 14 here. This one's dope. You might find this one really cool.
That's interesting because in my current philosophy, I do think I am making the assumption that a debate is never reversed. It is either dead or alive. I keep toggling back because I used to have it. Oh, we can prove this argument being wrong, but really what we do is we flip the whole argument of what alive means when it goes beyond dead. It doesn't go to undead. If it's like, oh, this is false, we reverse the wording and now it's a little bit alive. So I wouldn't have normally thought that this dead alive concept would work, but it actually does, because I keep, I've done this so many different ways that I keep
I'll bet.
getting stuck in old ways of thinking about it. So that's fascinating. I wouldn't have seen that. That would be amazing to have a graphic towards the roots, and you can have sizes of roots for their importance, but their amount of greenness
is whether they're real or not. Because you may have an emotional attachment to think my node is the most important node, but actually it's either not contributing much globally through its connectivity, or it's being disproven by things beneath it. And there's a way to get both of those two dimensions visualized at each node. Either through color and thickness, or color, thickness, and you could just double up on
and opacity.
This, whatever we call that one, lightness or opacity.
One thing I haven't figured out that I kind of gave up on is knowing, because mathematically it may not even be possible, is knowing what is counteracting this. Like you said, yeah, this is all moot down at the bottom because that whole branch is being, this is the wrong metaphor because it's not what we're doing now. This whole branch is dead because there's a con on it, right?
Which the metaphor is that the cons are the bugs.
Yeah, right. So it has a huge bug. So yeah, so visually representing that these are great arguments in and of themselves, and they're completely true, but they're dead because up earlier in the root, that whole point is counteracted. Like, yeah, you know, you're gonna decrease crime, but you're also decreasing our freedoms. So yeah, it's true. Both are true, and both counteract
That's
whether
where,
or not we should do this.
yeah, and that's where like when these stop being trees and they start being networks and circles, it gets another. It may just
Yeah, and I think
devastate
I'm okay with simplifying things to where if claims are repeated, I just would have the root be in multiple places just because people, you know.
Well, and so
make it
that's where
easier.
like there's a space on each. I mean, if you were to actually sort of like draw maybe, you know, this one more kind of in this vein, there's who I am, there's my contribution to my parent, and then there's my my children's contribution to me.
Mhm.
And it's important, I think, to just differentiate those and understand, like, and so I was sort of being like, well, the impact on my parents' node is me representing myself with my primary element. Like, I am here. This
Mhm.
is me. This is my main div. This is my main thing. And then the way that my children impact me. But the thing that I'm kind of struggling with in this interface is that it is effectively, in a certain sense, one and the same, except for the importance score.
Mhm.
Where like you'd quite literally be like, well, you know, everything contributing to me is making me who I am. Until this gets sorted, like kind of until the like, in a sense, like what does the actual overarching like tree look like and why and what's pegged to what, then it when that's still in question, I struggle to go put it into because the thing that you do have here is thickness, which you don't, if you're going to use here, if you're going to use this for thickness to somehow articulate, and this again is kind of inverted, I think.
Yeah, I mean, using thickness at some point breaks down because if that whole root is eaten by a bug and it has 0 thickness, I can't draw it. So there's no way for them to look at the arguments beneath there and say, oh, why is this argument? You know what I mean? So I had
It
one of the
needs to look
problems I
like
had with this is that so many things go to 0 in this math that I have
Right.
to have some way to show the zeros. So even like fading out doesn't kind of work in some places because it becomes completely white. You can't, or what it comes same as the background color.
Well, you
or
set your
maybe not.
minimum
I
as
mean, if you had gray.
non-zero and like.
Well, the
like,
minimum does go to 0. It just doesn't go negative now.
well, you just set your scale on the colors as like.
Oh, right. To not, right.
Lightness at like negative,
right, to not
or
go all the way.
at 0.15 or something, and that, and
So
then
yeah. So that works for colors, but
map
yeah,
the
when you go to
scales.
size or thickness, you have to be careful because if the thickness gets too small, you can't see it. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, and that's why color might be a better choice in those situations where things can go to 0. And that's why, yeah, I was going with size and then two like fully opaque and then partially opaque, so you could still see that. Yeah, I just had it more polar rather than it being a gradient. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's I think you've inspired me with some ideas. I'd like to go and think about it. I'd like to steal some more of your time in the future, but
For sure.
there's two paths I'd like to explore. One is kind of this concept of the UI on how to get the intuitive feeling of weights and measures. But also there's just kind of the practical stuff of how many buttons do we want to show when, and how do we indicate that this thing that we're expanding it, or are we expanding the information about it, or are we expanding its children, and kind of those decisions. How many buttons to show where, how much information to show where. Although I'm starting to think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the UI where that's all configurable. And then we can play around with it on the actual UI itself. Because I think where this other stuff that we're talking about, you kind of have to have planned ahead. The other stuff where it's trade-offs maybe. And there are times that you'd want, I want the superpower interface anyways, right? So I want to be able to agree and disagree. But if I'm a new person looking at it, maybe I want to turn that off. So maybe those are more configurations. And I'm going to make the colors configurable as well. So. And I'll take a look at that link you sent.
So in here you have reset these. In here you have now kind of a representation of alive versus dead, where you might end up with but yeah, you'd want to play with the, which thing is better expressed. Is it a mixture of chroma, or is it a brightness thing? Because this does not, low global impact on like, are you going to count that at every level? So like the thing that we're not really modeling is if we took this thing and we took this thing. I'm sorry I didn't like duplicate this early on.
I was screaming in my head, but that's okay. I can set it back.
You're like, leave it.
I should duplicate the whole board before I let you in it.
Blast through it. So
and that's a frame, by the way. That's why things might be a little fidgety.
Like if I were to go down, another layer, and it's like, are we? Yeah, and then this one gets really faded or something down to here. The thing would be that like as you move, I see. Oh, that's why it's carrying its children. As you get lower and lower, if we're not using size, we're using overall importance. You could stack them in double when you do a visualization. What I mean is like, you can double up the channel is what you use to express a particular dimension, right? So there's the chroma channel in this case. There's the thickness, X, Y. There's the vertical height, the width, and then there's the lightness or opacity. Better to say lightness because you're probably not making these things less and more opaque in this case. But that's the fast way to approximate it when you're messing around here. You could double up in the roots view. You could double up in a way of width and lightness, because you have the width real estate to accomplish that. And whereas in the constrained UI, you would still have one of those channels, i.e. the lightness channel, to mean global global contributive impact.
Yeah.
And it would stand out right in front of you. And then its color would be intuited as how alive is my down channel, and its global overall impact, its local impact would be essentially how alive do I look compared to my competing
Hmm.
siblings.
Yeah.
There's a missing impact dimension in each of these, which is challenging. But that's okay. At least putting this here allows us to maybe think, should we and how bring back in importance. I'm sorry, importance.
Importance. Yeah.
But if I want to figure out my local impact, I sort of can like scan all my siblings and go, how dark and what color am I? And do I am I building up an army of green, or am I sort of diminished by an army of brown?
Yeah.
Or
right.
Yellow.
Mhm.
Like, and then okay, so that's what's contributing to, you know, my upline. And then if I go up, but if I'm like, and then if I want to go, well, what am I globally? What's my impact? Well, it's like, well, how green am I?
Mhm.
If I'm as soon as I put in my own, if I were to enter a node onto this thing, like if people were contributing, it would show up as either complete green or complete brown, whichever way you've stated it, until those things get diminished. Times some importance factor that is still hidden, right? But then its impact, how light it is, would be where it sits in the overall network of how much I am or am not contributing to the upper parent through my connectivity. And so as you scan less and less important things, you have less and less saturation, so to speak, of the nodes.
Yeah. An interesting thing about the weight of I just kind of want to mention this, then probably need to let you go, is to think about is that there is in the math, there is a fact that if you think of it as a root structure, and this is the complete visualization and no text version, right? Is that when a node splits, it is truly in the math, the two roots that come off of it are both like 50% of the weight, unless one's dead and then the other one takes up the space. But it is always a division. So when you look at, let me show you, as you go further down in the tree, the potential impact on the parent one, not its actual impact, but its potential impact, does get divided by the number of siblings it has. So the boxes get smaller and smaller. This may not be helping at all, but it works.
I think you're there. You know what I would do actually with this one is take the height out of the equation here and make, for example, see all these dark orange ones on the left on this -100. They should have the same height as their sibling, the purple one that has things nesting. Because right now you're saying that like if I have things nesting, I get a different height dimension, and which means that it must be somehow.
Well, that's just room to show the borders. Actually, I mean,
I know, but once you factor it into
without the borders, like they're all the same height here. So
yeah, but your borders representation is a representation of the containing of your entity, and like you want to create equality on the height ones. So the orange on the right, bring that to the top. The max purple in all of those should be the max purple. Like you kind of have to run back up the tree and like propagate the heights, which you did in template populator recently. But I would do it here visually for the same.
I just don't know how to show the border and have them all the same height.
What do you mean? Like
I'm just misunderstanding what you're saying.
So for example, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dark orange squares on the left.
Yeah.
Their height should be the max height of the most borderized thing.
Yeah. So
or take the purple one with the border, make it the exact height of the orange ones, and shrink everything within it.
Purple one. See, the leaf
Is
nodes
that
are
purple?
all
Is the
same
purple
height.
thing with the border next? So you have node 1 is orange, node 2 is orange, node 3 is orange, node 4 is orange, node 5 is orange, node 6 is purple,
Yeah.
and then it also has children nodes, correct or incorrect?
Well, in this case, I'm only representing the leaf nodes, but yes, there is a, yes, there is a node, and then it has children. It has 3 purple children, and then this purple child has an orange child, and then it has a
You're only
leaf.
representing leaf nodes.
Well, these boxes are, the filled in boxes only representing leaf nodes, and then if it's a parent, it's a border. So the leaf nodes are all the same heights. The difference in the reason why you have this extra space here is to make room for these borders. I could expand this in height, but then that's giving an incorrect difference between this and this, but
Like if you're to
it's
take
a
the overall
trade-off.
area of the leaf nodes, so you're talking about every leaf node. Yeah.
Yeah. So like this is a leaf over here. And it has a high, it has 100% truthfulness, and it has a fairly big, well, I'm sorry, this is inaccurate because so this one, because it's several layers down, its width is smaller, and these, you see the width of this one is the same as these 3 combined. So because they're contained each with a parent node, the width was divided. Instead of being as big as this one, they're, the total, if you added up the width of these 3 leaves, this leaf and these 3 leaves, it would be the width of one of these. Anyway, so
Yep.
but it works
Mhm.
exactly like a root structure, to where the more you divide the root, the total impact on the total potential impact of that node on the parent gets cut in half
Yeah.
or in thirds, depending on how many legs you divide the node. So there's a mathematical similarity between roots and branches in this system, which is another little nuance that we have to decide: do we want to express that, and then if so, how? In this example, it would be expressed by this. The further you go down in the tree, this darker purple would progressively be smaller and smaller.
I mean, the other thing that you have available is like if you took all these visualizations you have on the left, you might want to just, oops, oh boy, here, oh yeah, just you can just, I mean, certainly you could tinker with flipping them.
Yeah. Oh, and if you ever want to play with
Oh, I have to
these
go
are on
back.
CodePen. So I actually have, you can play with the code here and change these visualizations. I don't know if you're looking at my screen or not, but it's all here. So I just have this data is copied out, and then you can just change the CSS or the HTML.
Can you flip it
So if
vertical by flipping all the heights and widths and
so somewhere I have its column, and I just need to make it row. Do you see where I have row?
Yeah.
Column. Boom. Look at that.
Kinda.
But then
Yeah.
now the fact that I'm playing with width as opposed to height. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you flip that, I
I
mean,
have to flip the other thing.
what I'm saying is that you almost in a sense have
a root structure.
Well, you almost have your macro iPhone based system sitting in front of you, kind of. And this, of course, though, is like it's working on containment. It's not doing overlaps, but you sort of have almost have a mini map, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what, it's similar to the Kialo kind of mini-map thing. Although I also was thinking about one to where it has those buckets, right? And you could just glance at it and see, oh, I see a lot of dark purple and very little light orange.
Hmm.
And I could get a feel for it. And I know there's all this faded stuff. So I know over here there's a big argument between the purple and the orange, and they're canceling each other out, and that's why they have no impact.
Yeah. So if
top.
you were to take this same concept and play it across with like dead and alive and
Mhm.
that other concept of like where you would be attracted to the more saturated ones and then oriented by color. Or you'd say, oh yeah, that one's contributing quite a bit of the green. And you could do height. But yeah, I think there's some ways to tinker with that that are worthwhile. I think that
Yeah. So
I think percentages is not going to be. I'm pretty confident that. I mean, they can be assistive, but I think they shouldn't be primary.
Well, yeah, I
And
mean,
color is such a powerful thing.
This will
that,
freak
like,
people. Yeah, using numbers is kind of a no-go. I think it's useful for, you know, experienced people that know what's going on to do some deep analysis.
yeah, but it doesn't like. It doesn't
work
really
for
offer
everyone.
anything intuitive at a glance in any
Right.
fashion.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the end, we probably use it. If we can figure out sizes and stuff, it'd be interesting to do something like this, except have them
for
be
sure.
the two colors and be faded. So that would be a lot of fun.
I heard a stat one time, or like a factoid, that like if you take a cross section, you may have heard this. If you take a cross section of a tree at any height and you add up the areas, the surface areas of like many small branches or a fewer bigger branches, that it at any cross section in height, except until you get to the outer maximum, I believe, you have the same area at any given. Yeah. So it'll be this, or it'll be many of those.
Yeah. And that's exactly, that's funny that's how this math ends up being, is that if you put two claims next to each other, they're dividing the total impact those claims can have. And if you have three, it's divided by 3, the total impact they'll have on the parent claim. And so as you get deeper and deeper nested in this, it's like if you put something in there, it has less of an overall impact. And so yeah, somehow making that visually intuitive, that as you divide these down, they get smaller and smaller, would be an interesting little
they do, yeah,
intuition.
And then you go, well, if I want to argue against this,
clear.
I need to go argue either the red or the purple.
Yeah, right.
Or I need to find lots of little arguments for the yellows.
If I do something way down here, it's not going to change the debate.
Yeah, when it's also interesting to well, they call it actually a tree. That's kind of a version of the tree graph, and the one 2 to your left is called a tree graph, or a tree chart is one of them.
And then here's another.
It's a roll up of every contributing sub branch, which certainly is. But at each one of these, you have a competing. At each one of your branches, you have a competing
kind of sibling.
You have a competing argument, and you have it mixing with a level of importance. And so, you know, the question. So what you need is 2 dimensions, I think, to represent that, which is going to be, you know, color and area, and if not color and lightness and color and lightness, if they're going to end up being represented basically on equal footing geometrically, like an iPhone scroll, using lightness to stand in as thickness, because like you could put in a bar. But I also think a mini map in the case of an iPhone isn't crazy either.
Yeah, I think that'll end up being
for navigation,
necessary.
But yeah,
great.
I think my overall global impact as lightness and some geometric thing like width and confidence being a blend could be interesting. All right, man.
Yeah.
Well, we'll
appreciate
chat
all
tomorrow
this.
about lots of different things as well. There's some interesting stuff to figure out with Nike. The seed to plant is that
Hold on a second real quick.